Mental wedges. Yeah. Because it's an idea that gets stuck. It gets wedged in there.
Mental
and you gotta pick it out. Pick it.
You pick at it.
Pick it.
You pick at
it.
Hey, welcome to Cultural Disruption.
Yeah.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about
interviews.
Like in-person ones, though. So, like, let's say
interviews.
you finally get past the phone interview. They say, come in. Maybe you had or didn't have a cultural tour. We hope you did.
Yep.
And then you're face-to-face with someone. I've had some interesting interviews.
They can be good or bad. Sometimes they're really bad.
They can be.
Sometimes they're really good. Sometimes they're mediocre.
So a couple of interesting stories really quickly. One, I remember interviewing at a company, sat down with the CEO, and as we were there talking, trying to talk about the business, he didn't, I think, know why I was there and was multitasking, right? And it was kind of, I had to reassure them several times, like, so I'm here interviewing for this job, and the CEO just didn't seem to have any idea what was going on.
Well, didn't even ask you why you were there. He's like, why are you
here?
here?
But when he walked in, he looked at me and didn't say anything, and I said, hi, I'm Jared Olson, I'm here for an interview. And he just kind of stared at me. It was really weird.
Yeah.
But here's the really short version. We were there for an hour and 15 minutes, and during that time, we maybe spoke for 10 minutes because he was talking to other people the whole time.
Yeah.
Some guy came in, he was talking about his neighbors and buying land, and it was the worst interview I think I've ever been in.
Where you're like, is this real or Farmville?
Yeah.
Where are we at here?
Seriously, it was super weird.
Yeah.
What interesting experiences have you had?
I personally haven't had any major personal, like when I'm being the one interviewed.
But as a recruiter.
But I have had interesting interviews before, and maybe part of it was my fault.
Yeah,
I had an experience where I had this person who showed up. I was working for a company, and we had a dress code standard that didn't allow any gauges.
High level.
Yeah, it was pretty high, pretty clean cut, right?
Yeah.
And this guy pulled up and
no scrubs.
No scrubs. He had big old gauges and dreadlocks, and I just decided, look, I don't want to waste your time. So I told him, I said, hey, look, buddy, I really appreciate you coming down, but just so you know, this is our dress code. And he flipped, and he started saying, I'm going to sue you. You can't do that. These are my rights. And I was just like, my dress code, I have the ability to set what my dress code is. But he was taking pictures of our phone numbers and everything because he was going to sue us and things like that. Actually, that same time, it was a job fair. It was an open job fair. And that same time, I had a guy who ended up waiting for like an hour because there was like 150 people there.
They're like, I want to talk to Blake.
He flipped at me. Well,
pretty much.
Yeah, but I mean, at that point, he flipped as well because he had to wait for super long. I mean, you have to kind of go in being prepared for anything, especially if you kind of know the situation, like if it's a job fair or whatever. So they should have known.
I had a candidate that was applying for a job with us that didn't get the job, and afterwards sent me a text message cursing me out and talking awful things about the company and how terrible we were. Yet in the interview, he seemed really interested.
Here's the funny thing: is just like the surefire way for you to get a second call back after you've been denied is definitely to go about thrashing the company.
Yeah, right.
That is the proper steps, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we want to talk to you about some do's and don'ts for your interview. We're going to take a perspective from a recruiter and also from an interviewee. Okay, so if you're a recruiter, there's a couple things you don't want to do. My experience, the problem was the CEO was multitasking. Don't multitask during an interview. If you have a laptop, close it. He literally took it out of his bag, opened it up, started emailing, plugged his phone in, took a phone call during it.
Like, do you see what I'm doing now? Watch what I'm doing because I'm not going to pay attention to you. Open.
Perfect example of what not to do. Yeah. So don't multitask. Close it. Give attention. Another thing that we've talked about in the past that really is a pet peeve of mine are the standard boring job questions.
Yeah. Sometimes you ask the same things over and over again, and you have to understand as well, what does that person, what are those boring questions really tell you about the person, right?
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of the idea behind a phone interview, if you will. You can kind of ask some of those boring questions to make sure that they're the right fit to bring them in, right? So once they get there, then you can have a little bit more fun. You can look past the resume, and we'll get into that in just a second.
So throw away your list of the same old questions. So what are some good questions that, as an recruiter, that you like to ask to get to know that person? Do you have any big go-tos?
I kind of just start off by saying, job aside, tell me about who you are as a person. If I were to talk to you, I'd say, who is Jared?
Yeah.
And then they'll start saying things like, well, I do this for... No, stop. tell me about who you are as a person, because cultural fit is just as important as
Yeah.
ability, right? And so, I mean, it's kind of a, I guess you could call that a boring question, but I really want to know who you are as the person.
Well, I think what's different about that and a little disruptive is you're saying, don't tell me as it relates to the job, right? Because when you go to an interview, the candidate is thinking, okay, how does this apply to what I'm going to be doing? And you're saying, I don't want you to apply it to what you're doing. I want it to apply to who you are as a person.
You have to remember that, yes, skills are important, and the ability for that person in that position are extremely important, but guess what? There are things that we can still teach that person. That person is someone that we can still teach. And actually, part of the reason why I asked that question is I like to find out, can this person be taught? And who are they as a person, so I can see if it relates to us as a people, us as a company, not just the product or the service itself.
Now, another thing I really like to do as a recruiter is don't sit behind your desk, right? Because that's where you're protected in your area of comfort, and you want to find a neutral place. And I also like to introduce the candidate to as many people that work for us as possible. So if somebody comes in to like interrupt you, have a question for you if you're at work, you could just say, oh, hey, I want to choose a so-and-so. We're in an interview. As soon as we're done, I'll be able to come back to you. But tell them about your experience here. And you can involve them in what your day-to-day work is, which makes it a better experience for the candidate.
It shouldn't just be between you and that person, right?
Yeah.
Gives you an opportunity for them to see, hey, is this somewhere I want to be? I get to meet some of the people here. So just as important as us trying to make that person fit to our job, they have to make sure that the job fits to them. And so it gives them an opportunity to do that.
Now, we've talked about proactive recruiting in the past as well, but one of the things we really like about that is don't go in mind with a certain job description you're trying to fill. Find great talent, and once you find them, bring them in and get to know who they are, just like you're talking about. But focus on those skills that may translate to other departments. So you may be interviewing them for a marketing position, but maybe they have some coding experience that would help your development team, or maybe they have good accounting experience. So focus on all those skills that translate to different departments, and you can craft a position just for that person if they're the top talent that you're looking for.
Yeah, I recently hired a graphic designer that was kind of that way. He came in as graphic design, but also I found out he likes to create video games, and so there's a level of coding that is required with that. So I can use that, a lot of different things. Kind of coming back to looking past the resume. I heard this quote once, and you've probably heard, a lot of you have probably heard it, but basically a resume is a list of all of your successes embellished and all your failures removed, right? And so you cannot rely solely on that piece of paper to tell you who this person is. And so in my efforts of tell me about who you are, right? That's really what it's all about. I want to get to know that person in who they are as a person, and that's where those little things come out. Oh, I do this for fun, and okay, that's a cool skill that relates to what we're trying to do here.
I like it.
So it's good
Okay,
stuff.
so what are some tips and tricks, Blake, that you would like to offer to the job seeker, the person going in for the first time into an office to have an interview?
I think one of the biggest things, and this is actually pretty common, but people fail to do it all the time, and that is know the company, right? If I'm going to go in and interview for a job, if I go in to interview at McDonald's, I should probably have eaten at McDonald's before, right?
Yeah.
And I should know a little bit about their history. I'll watch the movie The Founder, right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a shining example of that.
But like if you're also going to go interview at Under Armour, buy an Under Armour piece of clothing and go interview in it, right?
Yeah,
to
and
show that you're a fan of the product.
Yeah, so it's about knowing the product, right? It's about knowing what it is the company does. And there are a lot of times where that's kind of vague, but you've got to do your research. There's so many resources today that can give you more information on who that company is.
So here's a place that a lot of people aren't looking that I would suggest you do look, and that's YouTube. Search for the persons you're going to be interviewing with, search for the company, find out as much as you can. In the past, I have interviewed with people, and in my research, I found that they've done TED Talks that I had no idea about, right? And it tells like story about their family history and who they are. So look on YouTube, look on all social media platforms, Google their names, look for articles they've written, look them up on LinkedIn, and it will help paint a bigger picture about who those people are that you're going to be interviewing with, and also what the company is all about.
And the nice thing about that is it gives me an opportunity when they do come in. I don't have to spend my time telling them about who we are and what we do, right?
Totally.
I can get actually down to the nitty-gritty and find out who they are and get to know them as a person, instead of wasting the time telling them what we do, right? Because if I'm the one talking, what am I finding out about that person, right? It has to be a two-way conversation. We have to be conversational, right? And I think you kind of talked about getting out from behind your desk. When you're behind that desk, you're the man on the high tower, right? Like, you've got the opportunity to kind of have the upper hand, and it's intimidating. It can be scary. Where really it should be more relaxed, right? And have more of that conversation rather than an interview.
Now, as the job seeker, you might go in and somebody might be asking you those same old boring questions over and over. Now, the advice that we would give to you in that moment, ask them a question. Now, they just want you to say the answer that they're looking for, but don't. Say, well, I actually have this question. Can you explain to me how this process is working, or whatever it is, for them to elaborate, to give you more information, to make a more sophisticated response. So if it's not a dialogue and it's just a one-way street, then you as the candidate have the ability and power to say, you know, I want to change the course of this. I'm going to ask you some questions before I answer that. And it will get the dialogue going. And then as they're asking a question, it politely interrupt them with a clarification question or taking it in a new direction. And then you're really going to stand out, I think.
You know, and as a recruiter, those are my favorite interviews, right? Because I really feel like I get to know that person better. And I can see that they're the kind of person that I would most likely want on my team. Someone who's going to ask questions and be informed. And like I said, it does become more of that conversation. I love it when I'm not the only one talking. I love it when, you know, they're actually asking me questions that make me think. Right?
Yeah.
It's huge.
So you've got to find those like really piercing questions that will help you understand what the job is, right? And those are the things that you want to answer, and you have to go prepared with them, and you do that by the research beforehand. Another challenge that we would give you as the job seeker is find out what the biggest issue is that they're currently dealing with before you go in for the interview. You can do that through networking, and then when you go to the interview and they say, do you have any questions? You can say, go off on your pitch of, well, I know the biggest issue you're dealing with is XYZ, and here's how I would solve XYZ, and here's why you want me to come and be the person to do that. If you can, in your interview, show them what the issue is, how you're the solution, then you're really going to increase your odds of getting that job.
Yeah, sound like a rap for just a second. In your interview.
Oh, I like that.
Oh my gosh, we are so white.
We don't have a lot. I don't have any
not rappers by any means. Yes, you do, Angel. I've heard you play the recorder.
And your bassoon.
It's like a balloon with two S's.
Yeah, bassoon.
Anyway, so know before you go, right? Like kind of when you're trying to dig a trench in your yard, you got to call blue stakes beforehand so you don't hit the gas pipe and blow the neighborhood up. It's a big thing.
It's going around.
But yes, ask questions, get to know the company, go in. Yeah,
and
there you go.
Get away from your boring questions.
Yeah,
recruiters, ask some good questions to get to know these candidates.
I make a note to every time they come in for an interview, I flip my desk and say, this is how it's going to be done.
You want to.
Let me ask you a question. Do you have my attention now? I mean, reverse. Do I have your attention now? Don't forget to subscribe.